the biggest identity is actually a value that I have, which is growth. I have an identity that I am someone who grows. And what that means is like, I'm going to change. For me, like when I think about resiliency is like, I recognize that part of being resilient is having to change. Like that's just part of who I am. And so if I see something that is happening that sucks or is forcing me to change, I'm like, well, all right. And then I just very quickly try to take the next step of what I need to do.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Headed Home podcast. I am Andrew, and I'm here with my beautiful wife and co-host, Jen.
Coolest co-host ever.
Hello. Yes, I am. Hello, my lovely lady.
Babe.
What's up, babe?
I haven't seen you.
I know. I feel like I still can't see you, but you're right here.
Oh, what a season.
Season.
Speaking of this season is really what we're talking about today.
What are we talking about today?
So I've been thinking about this a lot, is identities. And, well, for a number of reasons I've been thinking about this. I think we have been in a season where we're really working with our kids on some different things. And so I have been thinking about what identities they're creating for themselves, right? And I've been thinking about my own identities. And then like also as you get older, how do people who are getting older perceive themselves and what identities do they have? And yeah, I'm really like thinking a lot about these like different parts of life and how you perceive yourself and the identities that you potentially have really impact your happiness and your fulfillment.
Well, life changes, right? People go through transitions, job loss, kids growing up, retirement, even just getting older. And I feel like a lot of times, well, I think for most people, I know I've gone through this before, but like we tie our identity to just one thing. And so it can be devastating when that one thing changes or goes away.
Yeah, no, totally. And what I think about sometimes, like, and even you mentioned like job loss, but even like, let's say you have like a bad day at work or like, parenting is hard or whatever is happening. I think that if you're just tied to that one identity, that can be like really devastating if that part of your life that your whole identity is tied to is kind of going awry. But the one thing I was thinking of, and I guess this has been the biggest experience for me around this, is when I was sick and kind of bedbound for months at a time, I lost a lot of identities. And I think for me, like really learning that like I had to have a lot of different things that I'm interested in and ways that I perceive myself, because if you don't have that, it can be really problematic. So, if you have multiple identities or meaning parts of your life that you're really invested in, then when one of those shifts, or even a couple, which is possible, right? When you get sick or your health is impacted, you still have those other things to fall back on, and you're not just left feeling lost.
100%. So today we're going to break down why people struggle with this, how multiple identities create resilience, and how you can start diversifying your own life right now, no matter your age.
That sounded like a commercial.
It was. We're doing a podcast. We're teaching a lesson.
All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so why do people struggle when they lose an identity? So let's start with this question, and you can take it from here. Why do you think people get so tied to one identity?
I mean, I think a big part of it is comfort, like
Right.
you get used to one thing, like when I was growing up, I danced, or I've been a parent, right? Or you're an athlete or a business owner, or I've been a teacher for 20 years. I'm not a teacher, but you know what I'm saying? Like if you have this thing in your life that you've been doing for decades. And so this one thing really becomes who you are. And so I think sometimes along with comfort, like the people that really struggle with change, really struggle with this idea of like life doesn't stay the same forever. And so that can be really problematic if that one thing really is how you perceive yourself.
Yeah. Like when your life changes and when that identity is taken away, and sometimes it's taken away by, it's not our choice, right? Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. And that can feel like we've lost a part of ourselves, and we end up asking the question, who am I now?
Oh, I think about this with our kids a lot. And I know I've talked to you about this, but I think when that happens, that can be a really dangerous place to be in, because that leads to you feeling lost or unmotivated or depressed, or like that's when you pick up these maybe not so great habits because you're filling this void of your identity of who you thought you were. And I know you went through that, like, and we can kind of talk about this later on, but like with football, when you were done playing football.
Yeah. And like, it wasn't like I was this, like NFL football player.
I mean, you were to me.
Yeah. Well, I think with sports, when you're growing up as a kid, thanks, babe, by the way, you're growing up as a kid, and that was a huge part of my life as a kid. Like, and in my mind, I think I thought I was going to play professional sports. And then, yeah, like I got out of high school and didn't even play in college. And I felt lost, and that can be disorienting, and I think a lot of people fall into it without even realizing it, So, you've got the athlete example. You could have someone who maybe spent their entire life working a 9-to-5 job, and then, then they retire, and then suddenly they don't have that routine, that something that gives them that daily purpose. I think not having a purpose is a dangerous place to be. And then, and also in that example, they don't have the same social interactions that they used to have. So, that can be scary.
I think one thing that's like on our mind and we've talked about a lot is like our kids are growing up, and, parenting changes every year. We parent differently because they're in a different stage. But over the weekend, our kids had sleepovers, and I looked at you and I was like, this is like different. Like this is changing because they're not hanging out with us in the same way that they have been. And so I think, for us, like if all of our energy was just focused on this identity of being mom or dad, as they grow up, this can, suddenly feel like you don't know what to do with yourselves when your kids don't need you in the same way anymore. And they don't need us in the same way that they did a few years ago. And one thing like I'm always thinking about is like, and even just, when they move out or they're getting older, or even with work, like I am always thinking about like, what are these things that I'm going to make sure are embedded in, in my day, or within who I am, because that does change and you are going to have different time with them. And that, not to say that void is going to go away, but there's things that we're going to talk about later on in the podcast, I'm sure that you can really do to address that,
Yeah. Well, let's take the next step and talk about diversifying our identities.
I feel like you're talking about diversifying your human portfolio.
I am. Yes, I'm diversifying my human portfolio. To stay resilient. So how does having multiple identities help us stay resilient?
I think it gives you options. Like if one part of your life changes, you still have other things that bring you joy, purpose, and community. So
community. That's huge.
That was like really aggressive.
Because we talk about that. Like I look at an identity as a community, or I guess you can build a community through an identity. And I think it's a really big part of this. When you have multiple identities, you're naturally just going to be a part of different communities. So if one of those changes or disappears, you're not just left aimless. You still have people and places that you can go to.
I also think like it's really important, like as you like grow yourself as a human, and we talk about this with our kids, but like for them to have access to different types of communities and activities, right? And I think that's really, really vital at making your world larger. And I think that feeds into like the power of multiple identities. I also think that the different identities feed into each other. So like, for example, your basketball league,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You stay active and play old man basketball, right?
I mean, it's young adult
Oh,
basketball.
right.
I'm one of the OGs.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll talk about that. I mean, that's like a big part.
I mean, just to go on to like how they can feed into or kind of spin off, it started as a way to just continue to compete and stay in shape and to stay active. But over time, I built a lot of really good relationships there. Some of my best friends are on my team and in that league, which then led to me wanting to coach Michael's team, which then connected to me to another group of parents. So I think that it can, like I mentioned earlier, like spin off. I think just having that one identity of playing rec league basketball has spun off into multiple other identities.
So my one thing, and I started this about 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I decided to do was to do a new thing every month, right?
Right.
And so what I really made sure to do is to start creating different things that I do. And sometimes they're small and sometimes they're not, right? But having this idea in my head of really making sure that I do multiple different things means that I'm not getting too comfortable with one identity, right? And I mean, this about me, I don't stay in the same job. I like learning new things. I like staying uncomfortable. Discomfort to me is really a vital part to this process. But I think when you build different parts of your identity, you're really creating these safety nets for yourself, because if one of those things falls away, and by the way, they will, right? I can't dance. I mean, I still dance, but yeah, I would be in bed for 3 months.
They push you around in a wheelchair when you get to that point and your hips don't work anymore.
But I can't run half marathons anymore, right? Because my neck. But I have created different things so that when that identity fell away, I didn't fall apart with it. Yeah. And so what I really want to talk about is how can you start building those new identities and really making sure that you do those different pieces.
Yes. So how can people start doing this? So if someone's listening right now and they're thinking, hey, I do feel kind of stuck in just one identity and it's about to go away, where do they start?
Well, what I would say is the first thing is you kind of have to take a step back and think about what interests you. And what are you not actively doing already? So it might be something you used to love as a kid, or maybe it's something that you've always wanted to try but never did. And I also think it's important to mention right here that you really have to work on getting yourself out of your comfort zone, because I think, and you tell me what you think about this, but I think that people that really struggle with this is because they're uncomfortable getting uncomfortable.
Right. Well, and like we mentioned early, that is one of the reasons why we marry ourselves to one identity, because it's what we know.
Yeah.
And as humans, we're geared towards comfort. And I know we've talked about on previous episodes, we're more geared towards being comfortable than being happy or being successful. So I agree. I think it's connected, it's intertwined. In order to change your identity, you're going to have to get uncomfortable, but I don't think that that's something that needs to be overthought. I think if you can just go into it with the mentality of baby steps, just starting small, like you mentioned, something that interests you that you're not actively doing. If you're curious about, getting into shape or just exercising, go walk around the block. It doesn't need to be go run 3 miles, or if you've thought about joining a club or a team, go to the gym or go to a meeting and check it out.
I also think that if you really, one specific thing that has worked for me is set up a structure with, one thing that's worked for me is every month at the beginning of the month, I figure out what is that new thing that I'm going to do. Because again, getting yourself in a place where you just feel comfortable doing new things is going to be really important. Right. And if you already have a hobby or an identity, and it doesn't, I think, and just to clarify, hobbies are somewhat different than identities, right? Like I wouldn't necessarily say like your job is your identity, but if you have one, how can you branch off from that? And so,
Well, your job is absolutely your identity, though.
Totally. So like what part of that, like I'm saying if someone doesn't have a hobby, like is there something in your job like, hey, like do you want to learn a new skill? Or like is there another thing that like interests you? Yeah. I think that's really important. And I think the other important piece is you have to know that like and find a level of comfort with like not being great at stuff at the beginning.
Right. Totally. And that's part of getting out of your comfort zone, being okay with it. Like I really want you to go do a stand-up comedy routine.
Okay, yeah.
You're really good at it.
Andrew.
Outside of this. But like no crowd work. I'm not going to be in the crowd. So just look at me and talk shit.
Andrew really wants me to, what is it, like a 60-second?
Stand up, yeah.
Or 5-minute
set.
Yeah, Andrew wants me to do that.
He's a stand-up comedian. He can get you in.
My whole set would just be about you, right?
That's why I'm not going.
Well, babe, you have to go. You have
to. This isn't a crowd work special. You just looking at me, running your mouth again, and you ain't seen a road south of 10.
Anyway, so I have it on. I have
keep
it.
Going.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right. Carry on.
That's great. So you don't have to be a pro, which Jen isn't in a lot of her new hobbies. That's one of the things I love about you, though, is that you're willing to put yourself out there and look stupid. Really,
that's never been an issue for me.
But you don't have to be a pro. Just go out and enjoy it, and you'll get better, and you will get more comfortable in that new identity. And it's real quick. It's never too late, right?
No, but like people think it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part is like best case scenario. And this is something we do with our kids, like my daughter dances and that's a huge identity for her. I don't want that to be her only identity. I want her, like, she's a basketball player. The kids wanted to learn how to play the guitar this year. I'm like, hell yeah, like, let's go learn how to play the guitar. I want them to have as many things going into adulthood as they possibly can because I want to build that muscle in them that, like, try new things. Yeah, you're going to be bad at it at first, but like it's totally fine. And like you can do those new interests and you don't just have to stick with the one thing that you know. In the same way, like Michael, he's into like a lot of sports stuff. He's also into like tinkering with science stuff.
Yeah.
And like
super into Legos.
Totally.
There's communities for Lego builders out there, I'm sure.
We could find him one. But no, I think
age isn't a barrier.
Age isn't a barrier. But like if you are being as proactive as possible, I mean, it's just with like any sort of like habit changes.
Right.
The earlier you start, the better, right? Because as we get older, it's really difficult to change our habits. But with that said, like I can change whenever I want. I just need to create those habits around that. But I do think like being mindful of what structures and supports can you build around like building that skill of trying new things and being okay with like failure. That's a hard, and we kind of like just like stepped over that, but like that's a really hard thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's why I start small.
Okay, so what's your
some grace?
What are you gonna try?
I have enough things.
No, I want to know.
So for me,
yeah.
I think I've done a pretty good job at creating multiple identities.
You have multiple personalities.
Talking about it, I'm not an expert on it, but I do think that
What do you consider your
1,000 lives?
So one thing that Andrew and I struggle with, I would say the opposite of what we're talking about, is that Andrew and I we could literally come up with a list of 1,000 different ways to live our life.
Well, I'm a gamer. I'm a coach. I'm a entrepreneur. I'm a lot of things. I make music. I'm a fan of sports teams. I think I have a lot of different areas, but of course I could always try new things, and I'm going to have to, because
do you know what?
I'm getting older, and a huge part of my life is being a parent right now.
Do you know, I just thought of yours. I just thought of what I want you to do.
Okay, let's hear it.
So Andrew and I've beat his ass a few times at this, but like
Huh?
you should be in a chess competition because you're really good. Not as good as me, but like
Yeah, I'd beat you probably 90% of the time that we've played.
untrue.
I do like chess. I mean, that falls into the gamer category.
Okay.
I like climbing mountains. I love exercise. I like challenging myself. But yes, there's new things that I would like to try as well. But our challenge to everyone listening is this month, try one new thing. It doesn't have to be big. Just take a small step towards something that interests you and see where it leads.
I love it.
All right, babe, let's finish this up here. What is one identity you've built that's helped you stay resilient?
Okay. So, I mean, this isn't a hobby necessarily, but I think the biggest identity is actually a value that I have, which is growth. So I have an identity that like I am someone who like grows. And what that means is like I'm going to change. And so for me, like when I think about resiliency is like I recognize that like part of being resilient is having to change. Like that's just part of who I am.
Right.
And so if I see something that is happening that like sucks or is like forcing me to change, I'm like, well, all right. And then I just very quickly try to take the next step of like what I need to do.
Yeah.
And so embedding in like my day that like I am someone who it stays uncomfortable and is willing to change and like try new things has really helped me stay resilient.
Love that.
What about you?
Can I say the same thing? So I would agree that I do the same. I think what has helped me stay resilient, and this might be the same answer as yours, but like a commitment to personal development, a commitment to my goals, a commitment to trying to be the best version of myself, and having systems in place that always brings me back to what those goals are, what my values are. And I think that helps me just continue to adapt as my life changes.
Is that why you've been listening to Jim Rohn in the morning?
I listen to Jim Rohn a lot. Anytime I need a spark of motivation, I listen to Jim Rohn or Brian Tracy, and I go back and
Or me.
Yeah, not you.
Oh.
No. So if you guys want to interact with us, maybe one of the cool things that you could do is let us know what the one new thing you're going to try and do this year or this month. You should let us know. That would be awesome. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend who might need to hear it. And thank you all for listening.
See ya.
Peace.